amazing speakers. But first, thanks everybody from the commodity trades for your great presentations and for being here today. So, the mental jump to the smart cities. First and utmost, we're going to hear from Bruno, President of Smart City Observatory at IMD, leader of various think tanks, co-founder at 4 of the most known indices, about why smart cities look beyond technology. And I hope, Bruno, you are here. Yes. Sorry, with this light, it's very hard to see. I should put on sunglasses. A very warm welcome. Make yourself comfortable. You have a microphone. Wonderful. And here is the clicker.
So good evening, everybody. Try to make it short. It's been a long evening. One thing I learned teaching in different schools and universities around the world is the following principle. Let's say your student will want to be educated in the morning. In the afternoon, they want to be entertained. So I'll try to stick to that principle and make it light and interesting. I'm French by nationality and culture. I've been working for 30 years in international organizations, mostly in the UN and at the World Bank, so I've heard practically every single cliché you can think of about the French. I will just mention one, which applies, I hope, not tonight. I once heard that French people are very good at dealing with very complex subjects and bring them to the level of total confusion. So I tried to make a complex subject, which is about benchmarking, measurement, as simple as possible, because it has implications that can be understood only if we stay simple. They are very, very basic principles. To do that, I would take the example of smart cities, but what I'm going to say applies to cities generally. The idea is the following. We have a tendency to think of nation-state at national level. Since the Congress of Vienna in 1815, this has been clear. There are nations, and these nations interact. A majority of them is member of the United Nations. So when we do an international comparison, an international index, international, we typically refer to statistics, to data that describe the national context. Cities are seen as a level below. Cities are part of a national set, and their data are part of the national set of data. The reason why the movements linked to cities are so difficult to measure is precisely because we don't get a kind of universal database in which we can track the economies of cities in the same way we can track the economies of nations. And here comes the paradox and the complexity, but I hope not the confusion. We should be able to understand that more and more cities are doing things that used to be the responsibility of nation-states. And this is radically changing the way in which businesses, governments, citizens interact with each other. We are only at the very beginning of that process. Hence, the paradox. That is, we deal with a level which is below the national level, and yet we want to build measurements that allow to compare the performance of cities at the global level. So the cities are below the nations, but the data are above those that refer to nations. Let me explain that in a simple way again. This is what we do. We publish a yearly index. We rank a number of cities, which we call smart cities. I will explain why. And we try to see who is doing better. We also publish, next to that, case studies where we go to the cities, We discuss with the citizens, the investors, whoever is leading in those cities, and we try to add context to the data. That's our yearly or daily task. This is what the media pick up. This is why there's so much coverage when the index comes out, and the next time will be on 9 April 2024. It is the ranking, especially the top of the ranking. So I'm not going to go into the detail of that, just to flag two things. That this ranking gives a special place to Swiss cities. That is, in this list, which is the top 20 or so, we have 3 Swiss cities, and they are in the first half of that ranking. The second one is, if you look at the right side, these blue stars designate cities which are located on the European continent. So we have a high density of Swiss cities and European cities. Is that a bias? Is it because we like Swiss cities and we like European cities? We hope not. But let's see how the data is computed. What we try to do is not to be influenced by the labels. So clearly, our index is called the Smart City Index. We want to look at smart cities. But we want to look also at cities who would want to be smarter, who are just starting or hoping to be smart cities. It's a global kind of index. And the way we do that is to differentiate this index from what exists all around the world. That is supply-driven indices. If you are a company based in Australia and you have a very good solution for smart parking, can be linked to your GPS, and you get into a crowded area of the city, and immediately you have signals telling you there's a parking spot there, there's another one at the 3rd level of that parking, these are the prices, and you can even link that to your self-driving car, if you have one, and it will take you to that spot. Okay? Very good product, people are excited about it, and then you build an index. And you build an index of cities depending on how much smart parking solutions they can provide. That's supply-driven. It has its usefulness, especially from a marketing point of view. We want to take a step back, away from technology, and start with the problems. So when we include a city in that index, it starts with a survey of the population, which can be foreign living there or born there, and we start asking them, what are the biggest problems you see in your city? And people will start screaming. They would say, oh, it's traffic jams, or it's absence of parking, or it's, oh, too many bicycles, or too many cars, or too many trains, or too many this, or too many that. And of course, you have long, long lists everywhere. Everybody likes to complain about their own city. Once we have this list of problems, we look at the solutions that have been offered. And most of them happen to have a technology component. This is why the focus is on smart cities. But we don't try to say who is good at using a particular technology, who is not good at using that technology. We try to say and to measure how much the solution offered fit with the problems detected. So we also turn to the same citizen, et cetera, and say, okay, regarding that solution, okay, garbage collection, traffic regulation, do you think that your city is addressing the problem you have detected? And if so, on a scale of 1 to 10, where is it? It's a 4, could be better. It's a 7, good, but could be even better. That's the kind of data we put together. And once we've done that, we try to summarize that in a visual fashion, in many visual fashions. So instead of giving huge tables and all the data, we try to identify ways in which ordinary citizens, as well as experts, can quickly understand where the sore points are and what can be improved in the city. And this is the point I would like to underline. These rankings are not about giving medals. They're not about naming and shaming and saying this one is good, this one is bad. It's about triggering action. It's to say, you're interested in doing that, why don't you look at what this other city has done? Maybe it applies to you, maybe it does not. But it may be interesting to compare experiences. And this is why, and that's my last slide, we clearly think that this kind of exercise can help, modestly help, not solve, help addressing a number of issues which are becoming increasingly important. The first one is that there is more than one way to be smart. The first book in the series of our publication was called 16 Shades of Smart. The idea being that you can be smart in some way in Hong Kong and smart in another way in Brasilia. You have to be smart relative to the endowments and the availability of factors you have at hand. With or without technology. Technology is never a given. There are places where less technology gives better results than more technology, and we have to be aware of that. Cities can learn from each other. This is what we try to do. Put something we try to be neutral, direct, and make it a basis for exchanges of experience. Third, cities will lead the global green and digital economy, which for us is the end game, by being more human-centric. And it sounds like a paradox to say we want to have more technology and we want to be human-centric. And the examples of the cities in the top of the rankings are examples where this apparent paradox has been handled properly. And cities and their leadership should see themselves as shapers of the future. This is not something which is very common. But if you take AI, for instance, it is going to be very difficult, it will take time to build the regulatory framework that we need. And the examples mentioned earlier about the European Union are a blatant example of that. But cities can be the living labs where things can be tested because they are more agile and they address a smaller group of people. You can make experiments. Even in China, which is not the most decentralized system we know in the world, cities are encouraged to experiment. So there's a degree of risk and innovation which is tolerable in cities much more than it is at the level of nations. And last but not least, and this has been mentioned already by several speakers today, talent is going to be where cities confront each other. This is where the high-performing cities are going to be even higher performers. Being talent hubs will be a recipe for being innovative and being competitive, and competition will increase among cities and talents. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for your very clear presentation and very interesting. I learned a lot about what these rankings are actually for. Improve people's lives rather than being a ranking list. That's a very interesting thought. So let's carry on with our next speaker. Jeffrey Huang is the director of the Institute of Architecture at the EPFL. And Jeffrey, you research the convergence of the physical and digital architecture. And we shall hear from you about your latest project, right?
Thank you.
Very much looking forward to it.
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, so it's well, thank you, Olga, for the introduction, and thank you to Olivier and Christian for the kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to introduce the project Blue City, if this is working. Let me see. Okay, so it's a great pleasure to introduce this project called Blue City. My name is Jeffrey Huang, and I'm a professor at EPFL, but I'm also the co-founder of Convergeo. And what we do at Convergeo is three things. We examine the effects of AI and digitalization on cities and architecture. We design future architectures that blend physical and digital technologies, and we develop tools for creating a better world. We started about 20 years ago with the design of the first node of the SwissNext in Boston that some of you may know, and since then we've been designing physical digital offices, physical digital learning spaces, smart cities, and so forth. So the Blue City project is the most recent of the project, a physical digital city, almost a culmination of all those projects. The Blue City is the Blue City project is an Inno-Swiss flagship project so we received seed funding of about 5 million to jumpstart the project, and it's a larger project, involves 9 research partners and 12 industrial partners. This is a preview of the website that will be up in about 2 weeks, so it's still a sketch, but you're the first one in the world to ever see it. So what is the Blue City project? Well, cities occupy only 2% of the global surface, but produce or consume about 75% or 3/4 of the global resources and contribute to 60 to 80% of the global greenhouse gas emissions of the CO2. So cities, you could say, are one of the main culprits of the climate crisis. So if you want to do something about the climate crisis, it is absolutely crucial to understand cities better. It is crucial to understand not only the symptoms, but also the causes. It is crucial to understand not only the static and visible form of cities, but understand the underlying dynamic and invisible flows in a city. And this is what Blue Cities aims to do. So Blue City is, the goal of Blue City is to create an understanding of cities as a network of flows, as a network of interconnected flows. So the flow of food, the flow of energy, flow of water, flow of waste, flow of goods, flow of people, flow of materials, flow of nature. And the goal is to connect them and make them more circular. So the project is organized around 8 sub-projects, around 8 flows, and is using the city of Lausanne as a living lab or as a case study. So in the flow of people, we try to understand all the movement of people in the city of Lausanne. So from pedestrians, from bikers, from car drivers, from people using public transport, and analyze the commuting patterns, the congestions, the bottlenecks in the short term, and then the migration patterns in the long term. In materials, we look at the flow of materials from outside the city to the city, within the city, and outside the city again. And we focus in particular on predicting the urban mining potential of construction materials. So what kind of materials, used materials, will come on the market in the future. So in 12 months, in 24 months, so that for architects, you have the time to plan to use those materials in the project. And for food and for goods, we take data from the Swiss Post, who is one of our key partners, to analyze the logistics of distribution. So where does your stuff, your food, come from, right? And how can we improve that, simulate alternative scenarios using neighborhood hubs is one, or crowd shipping is another one, and several other ones. In energy, we have data from Romande Energie, another partner, to understand energy districts and examine alternative energy sources and their trade-offs. In water, again, we get the data from Drupal and City of Lausanne to understand just what are the flows in our city from clean water, gray water, wastewater. And in the sub-project waste, we work with Helvetia Environment to look at essentially the collection, the distribution, and the sorting from the household to the incineration centers, and explore alternative ways of locating sorting. So where is the optimal places for sorting? Is it at the households? Is it at sorting centers? Is it at the end? And finally, in the flow of nature, we look at the flow of biodiversity from a multi-species perspective. So what is unique is not so much the individual flows, but really that we look at them all together. So we try to connect all those flows that typically exist as silos and bring them together, because most of the important questions regarding the future of cities actually involve many different flows. Questions of urban planning, question of how to get to net zero, the decarbonization, understanding the effects of reducing speed to 30 kilometers per hour or even less, the effects of planting 50% more trees, so increase the tree canopy in Lausanne by 50%, which is the plan, but nobody actually knows what the effect is. And so we're trying to build a model to be able to understand that. A key challenge is to synergize or synchronize the spatial and the temporal scale to get the granularity right. And I don't know how I'm doing with time. A few slides about the AI we are using. Essentially, there are 3 steps. So there's a data collection step where we take data in from satellite data, from street data, OpenStreetMap, and from the flow data, specific flow data from all the flow categories. And this gets put into a large flow model. So similar to a large language model, we have our large flow model where you have flow fragments and the relationships and where the AI is trained. And then based on a stimulus or stimuli, new flows can then be generated. This is very helpful, especially if you have incomplete data. So the AI can help complete data where you don't have the data. It can help to estimate a flow data in a completely new city, or if you go to a completely different place, to Asia, to Africa, that if you look at satellite images, that you can get a rough understanding of what are the underlying flows. Or, of course, it can use the past flows, the time series of flows, to predict possible future flows. So in terms of architecture, the goal is to create an open, transparent, radically decentralized twin of twins, and with the objective to empower citizens rather than, or to give them more agency rather than reduce agency. So maybe in summary, Blue City is employing AI to create an understanding of cities as a network of interconnected flows in order to address the climate crisis. The project is just beginning, but the few first experiments and data manipulations have shown or are already indicative where this is going. So I'm very optimistic that with a platform that is open and transparent and accessible like a Blue City, we can address typical questions of smart cities, such as data privacy, so who owns the data, who has access to it. We can address the fear of losing autonomy to an AI. So the AI may be programmed to get to net zero, but what happens to the agency of the people living in it? And of course, then to balance the tripartite objective of decarbonization, livability, and biodiversity, which is a delicate balance to strike. So I think this is the last slide. I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Allow me one quick question. By when do you think you will see first results?
2026.
2026? Okay, so we shall all stay tuned. What an amazing project. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. So with that, we come to our final keynote speaker of today. Pierre Mirlesse has 25 years of experience in different executive positions, and he serves as a consultant and advisor to governments, organizations, and corporates on reimagining how sustainability strategy and execution can look like. And we're super excited to hear from you today, Pierre. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Olga. Can you all hear me well? All right, very good. I'd like us to flip the coin on sustainability and look at sustainability if this is going to work. All right. Let's look at sustainability in the context of a city. And sustainability is actually a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for us as citizens, as residents, as corporations. If you manage a city, or if you're in a political landscape, here's a huge opportunity. But how do we take this opportunity into realization, into outcome? Well, I would argue that a good place to start is the Sustainability Development Goal 11 from the United Nations. There's a number of quotes that are coming on sustainability, saying it's got the potential to have a huge social impact. Smart cities are expected to create millions of jobs in the coming years, according to the World Economic Forum. From an environmental standpoint, there are numerous examples around the world that cities are able to control better their energy consumption and to reduce it. From an economical standpoint, the previous speaker mentioned how much cities represent in terms of opportunities, economical opportunities. And mayors themselves that practice sustainability in their city, this SDG 11, the Sustainable Development Goal 11, create some longevity from a political standpoint. Here's Margrethe Vestager from the European Commissioner quoting this mayor of Vienna that has succeeded to the previous mayor that was there for 24 years. And as you know, Vienna comes on top of many smart city benchmarks. And the practice of sustainability within the city has provided the previous mayor and the current mayor appraisals from, well, not just Margrethe Vestager, but from the international community. The EU, the European Commission, has put together a plan of 1.8 trillion euro investment. And this is the next generation EU recovery plan, with an ambition to reduce net greenhouse gas and to be the first continent to be net zero by 2050. At the same time, there's a new legislation. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called CSRD. This one is carried forward by DG FISMA, which is the Financial Directorate General at the European Commission, and that takes in effect January 1st, and that will force companies, first initially large companies, but over time smaller companies, to report their scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. These reports will have to be audited. So what we're going to see is not just an investment from the European Commission, giving incentives to companies that operate in the European Union to become greener, to benefit from the investment that the European Commission is making, but also some legislative package that will force companies to report their greenhouse gas emissions. This is going to be very important because companies will have to report their greenhouse gas emissions progress audited by a third party. At the same time, they will be publishing their financial reports. That's going to be a major change in how companies operate in the European Union. In Switzerland, so we're in Switzerland, the Confederation is suggesting that, well, cities have a huge opportunity and potential, economical potential. At the same time, it's going to require a lot of infrastructure and public services to evolve. So this is an opportunity from a global standpoint which is recognized. It's an opportunity in the European Union. And Switzerland is recognizing this opportunity as well. How are we doing overall on sustainability? Well, the United Nations published in 2023 their intermediary reports against the targets. And, well, the news are not that great. Around 140 targets are either moderately or completely off targets. And remember, the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them. The one that we're talking about here is SDG 11 on smart and sustainable city. So how is this one doing? How are we progressing on SDG 11? On this chart, you can see all the development goals. You know, what's to take from this is that we're missing a lot of information on cities. They're not measuring themselves the way they could be. There's a lot of information in cities, there's a lot of information in governments that are looking how cities are doing, but this is not being tracked properly. At least this is the finding from this intermediary report from the United Nations. So is this possible? Can we actually measure the progress that we have on cities? Well, the United Nations put together a process called United for Smart and Sustainable Cities, which gives the possibility for cities to measure themselves against a number of KPIs, and I'll come to that in a second. The state of Geneva, the canton of Geneva, was the first canton in 2022 to get verified by the United Nations against those 111 KPIs put together by the United Nations in a completely independent way, and got a verification report in October 2022. The picture you see on the left is actually the smart city manager at the time from the canton of Geneva, and a representative from the University of Geneva that collectively collaborated to measure those 111 KPIs. The purpose of this verification from the United Nations is not to compare one city against another one. You know, Bizerte in Tunisia is not easily comparable to the canton of Geneva or to Dubai. No, they're all in completely different landscapes. But the purpose of this measurement system is to enable the cities to compare themselves over time and to improve over time, to become more sustainable over time against the three pillars of sustainability: economic, environment, and society and culture. And those are all the different dimensions that are looked at in this report. So what did we learn as we were progressing through this 9 months of verification? Well, you know, measure what matters. There are 111 KPIs that will give you an indication of how well you're actually doing on one metric or another, whether it's healthcare or mobility or economical benchmarks. Gender, for example, is also being measured. There are multiple stakeholders at the level of a canton. You can imagine there are multiple different departments and each have their own metrics. Are we measuring the right elements? Are we measuring the right things? And, well, in Geneva, in this case, Canton of Geneva, actually was the first geography that measured all of the dimensions that the United Nations was looking for. So that's good news, but there's still work to be done in Geneva in this case. It's a journey, so that requires assessment, preparation, verification, and then to put an improvement plan. But the key here is really measure what matters, and there are multiple barriers when you do such an exercise. So it's really a humbling exercise to go and figure out together how to overcome the challenges that you face. You can too. So there are a number of things that you, whether you're a city or whether you're in a company, can do to contribute to sustainability and benefit from it. So, for example, I was talking about this United Nations verification process. It's not just big territories like I mentioned, Dubai or the canton of Geneva. Puy, you know, right close to Lausanne, is a small city of 12,000 inhabitants. Themselves went through this verification process and as a result designed a roadmap on how to become more sustainable. So Geneva as a canton or the city of Puy, now who is going to be next in Switzerland? The EU CSRD is a call to action for all companies operating in the EU to become more sustainable by being compliant to this new legislation. Well, by the way, California just put some bills that was signed by their governor over there, Governor Newsom, to do exactly what CSRD is doing in Europe. So companies doing over $1 billion in the US of revenue and that operate in California will be forced to report by 2026 how well they're doing on scope 1, 2, and 3. Greenhouse gas avoidance in scope 3 are some of those initiatives, data center, liquid cooling. There are multiple initiatives everywhere, and we heard about some of them earlier in this conference. And the last one is responsible sourcing. So as a company, it's important to also have, or as an organization, to have responsible sourcing. When you get this report, you can click on all those links. This link in responsible sourcing links you directly to the Nestlé responsible sourcing. They have many, many different parameters that they're looking at. A piece of warning, though, is that whatever gets started in a company should avoid greenwashing. In the case of Nestlé, they were also challenged by some organizations, brand audit in this case. Are they truly living by what they claim they're saying they're doing? So, let's avoid greenwashing. Let's measure what matters. We can all do our share. And if we do it right, then this can be a great opportunity for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Out of interest, how long did it take to measure all these 111 indicators?
9 months.
9 months. Okay, it looked so easy on the chart, and then, wow.